everybody out there. Thank you for joining us today. This conversation is now more important than ever before. On this week alone, Walter Wallace Jr. was shot and killed Monday night. The police say he refused to drop a knife. So our fight continues. I'm Tanika Ray, and I'll be your moderator today. Aspire TV Revolt Representative Sheila Jackson Lee and 88 Chump, an organization started by George Floyd's childhood friends, have all joined forces to press the culture forward and discuss the future of Black. Today's conversation is literally about life and death. It's entitled Stop Killing Us, Challenging Police Practices in America. Now, before we get into that, I'd love to introduce you to Carl Davis. He's the founder of Future of Black America. Hi, Carl. Carl? I see him, but I do not hear him. Carl, come on board. I can't hear you. No? Okay. Well, let's keep it moving. Carl was going to introduce himself, and when he does get on board, we'll just bring him back to talk about the inspiration for the future of Black America. Today, we have an amazing set of voices who are committed to challenging police practices here in America. From politicians to activists, they're all here to use their platform to ensure that Black lives do matter, not just to us, but globally. We have Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, who represents the 18th Congressional District of Texas. Rapper, producer, actor, and activist David Banner. The youngest mayor ever elected in the city of Compton. As an LA girl, I'm very proud, Miss Asia Brown. And finally, Reverend Stephen A. Green, the social justice pastor of the Greater Allen AME Cathedral of New York and chair of the Faith for Black Lives. So we are ready to tune all the way in. Are you guys ready to go? I can't hear you guys. You can take your mutes off.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Tanika, for having us.
I was like, am I here by myself? What's up, you guys?
We're with you. We're with you.
Thank you. I know this is a really tough, traumatic topic that we've all been dealing with for years. And this year, it seems to be at a boiling point. So it's really especially clear and important that we actually start to organize our thoughts, we start to organize our movements, and we start to have real clear ideals of what we want so that we can manifest it, right? I'd love to go into right up off the bat, how do we eliminate lethal police practices? Because I think that's what we're all talking about. We have a lot of conversations about defunding the police. But let's get right into that question. For as long as we can all remember, we've had to have different conversations with our kids about police. I currently have a 6-year-old, and she is literally learning right now how the cops are there to keep you safe. It is horrific to be her mother and have to tell her a different story. If you're stopped, whether you've done something wrong or not, the steps you take with the police have to be precise, exact. One wrong move, one wrong word, and it could mean your life. And we've also talked about reform for decades. Consider Rodney King. That was 26 years ago. Trayvon Martin, or maybe even longer. And now George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and so many more. And for once, it seems like reform is kind of possible.
Testing, has that better?
So what does police reform look like to you guys? I want to start right there. And with you, Mayor Asia Brown, what does police reform look like to you?
For me, it's about accountability and recognizing that the system that was created to allegedly protect and serve has not done that, and that there is a need for federal and state reform to ensure that bad police officers are tracked and that they aren't able to transfer to other stations. I believe that the investigative process must be changed. Currently, we have police officers investigating police officers. We have police officers that work in unison with the district attorney's office and decide not to prosecute people that obviously kill black and brown people or provide excessive force. And so there is a need for statutory changes that prevents police officers from being able to continue to serve as police officers if they know they have a history and a paper trail of continuing to really defy the rights of people of color, and of course, all people throughout the nation. I also believe that we have to reconsider our sheriff's departments and other law enforcement vehicles that really have their foundation in being not for people. We have to also recognize as a nation that the sheriff's entity as a whole, they were founded to be slave catchers, and they morphed into being police agencies, but the institutional fabric is still the same. And so there has to be a recognition that the system is broken and that there must be an atonement for the continual trauma that has been inflicted on Black people since the inception of this nation.
Wow, sis, you got David all hyped over there, right? It was when she said it started off as slave catchers, because any of you guys can Google right now. You just Google slave catcher medallion or badge. You are going to freak out. It is literally identical. They didn't even change one stroke. It is identical to a police badge. David, what do you have to say on that matter?
To be honest with you, I'm sort of tired. I've been saying the same thing for 10 years. Black folks, we keep acting like it's just starting now. I think we react when white people react because of COVID, because of just the fact that we have videotapes. This is how it's always been. And the thing is we keep acting like the system is broken when it was founded on top of us, not for us. So I get tired of all the talking. The truth is this will not stop until the same thing happens to their children, until the same thing happens to their lives, until their lives are threatened the same way our lives are. It's so funny how we talk about this all the time. As a Black man in America, the police are no different than the robbers are to us. We don't know what's going to happen every time they pull up. And the thing about white America, if something happens to a dog in America, they can change it in one day because that's something that they want to do systematically. The truth is, America was built on Black bodies, and that has never changed. So until some of these scared Black folks start admitting that we made some wrong choices and that we're going to have to change those choices, and those choices will not be pretty. Freedom doesn't come for free. There has to be a level of sacrifice. And some people don't want to lose their place in a white supremacy, let me not say white supremacy, in a white insecurity state of mind, because they are not superior, they are insecure. So in me saying that, man, it's like even saying, we can't breathe, stop shooting us. Like even saying that we want to be equal to. I don't want to be equal to, I want to be left alone. I don't want to be equal to, I think I'm better. So in me saying that, man, like Black cops don't make the same choices that white cops make. If it was really mistakes, if it was the same excuses that they're making, then Black cops would do it to white children. But that almost doesn't happen statistically at all because they want to kill our children. That's just the truth. And until we admit that, I don't think things will never change. We got to talk about the things that are uncomfortable to talk about.
I agree with you on that. I've been saying that for years, that we've got to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. But I'm going to make a little revision to what you said, if you don't mind. I think that the indoctrination of police are equal across the board. However, when a Black cop kills a white person, they are held accountable. And that is why you see Black cops not persisting in that behavior, because they know they will go to jail. We have not seen the case where white cops killing Black people senselessly on the streets of America have been held accountable. That lone detail will send the message to other police officers not to kill Black people. We've got to get that simple little detail down. I want to go to Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee on that note. It seems like accountability is really the problem here. How do you see it? Congresswoman? No? Okay. Can you unmute for us? Thank you so much.
Here I am.
How do you respond to the fact that I think David has a really clear point, which is Black cops don't do this to white kids, but at the same time, there are facts. You can Google that as well, where Black cops who have accidentally killed white people have gone to jail. So the rule applies to them. Unfortunately, for white cops, none of them, every single one of them has gotten off, as far as I know. What is your response to that?
Well, Tanika, thank you so very much for having me or for you being part of this discussion. And thank you to all of those who are here as part of the discussion as well. Let me just say that we have need of reformational, transformational change. We can continue this discussion over and over again, but until we end the vileness of white racism and institutional racism, we will continue to be repeating ourselves. You are right. The game and the rules continue to change when it deals with our community. And let me speak specifically to where we are today in my great city. Today, we are mourning the death in the line of duty of a Black cop, 41 years, 41 years of service to this community. You know, a good cop, like many of us have in our families. But yet he was called to a domestic violence call and saving the lives of a mother and a son. And the other individual did not die, but he kept them from shooting and killing the mother and son and his partner in this effort. He is a hero that we want to talk about. At the same time, tragically, in Philadelphia, a man armed merely with a knife and whose mother cried out that he was having a breakdown is now dead. Why? Because he wasn't wounded, he was shot 14 times. What is the distinction that happens which calls parents of Black children to give them the talk? And so until we completely deal with this stark contrast, all tonight's discussion will be around that. And I'm delighted with the mayor who's indicated that we need changes. And I hope to be able to talk extensively about the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which I helped write. But I think what is important is I want us to know what the cancer is in this country. And we must have a collective recognition of it because it deals with how Black cops are treated if they shoot someone who happens to be of a different race, particularly an Anglo. Maybe in some instances where they're saving a life, they might be given some leeway. But the last series of issues that we've dealt with has been white cops and Black kids or Black young men. And that is what I hope that we can have some resolve of as we discuss solutions to that, which include reimagining, includes this law, but it also must be a question of ridding the cancer of white racism in our institutional systems, which include the system of law and order.
Yes, I totally agree with that. And the systems are, they don't stop there. There's also education, right? So even in education, our kids are being conditioned, their kids are being conditioned that white is innocent and angelic and Black is dangerous and scary. So it's everywhere in this system and it pervades our minds and our thoughts. I want to go to you, Reverend Stephen A. Green. Spiritually, you're a social justice pastor, which I've never heard of before. There are some practices, lethal policing practices, that everyone feels probably needs to be eliminated, like chokeholds and neck restraints in the examples of George Floyd, the use of spit hoods, Daniel Prude, injecting ketamine to sedate suspects, Elijah McClain, no knock warrants, Breonna Taylor. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. How are you preaching or ministering to your flock about where we are as a social justice reverend pastor?
Sure. Thank you again for this conversation. And it's pivotal that we are having this on the heels of this presidential election because it reflects the trauma that Black life in this country has had to navigate through for the last 401 years. And this election is not just about the last 4 years, but it's truly about these last 400 years that we have tried to fight for our existence. And as a social justice pastor, one who believes in the radical liberation and love of Jesus Christ, who goes into temples to turn over money changer tables because they are exploiting the poor, we recognize that when we're dealing with these practices of policing that are harmful to the existence and to the humanity of not just Black people, but to all people in this country, we recognize that we must reimagine how we engage with the system of policing in this country. And I believe that, as Frederick Douglass, who's adorned behind me, would suggest, is that we are having a conversation about reforming an institution that is inherently, what the mayor said earlier, it is true to its core. The policing institution in America is doing exactly what it says it is doing and what it was created to do. We can't try to have a conversation in 2020 about reforming an institution of slavery that continues to try to dehumanize Black bodies in this country. We must abolish that institution and create a new institution that would help us imagine public safety. We want to talk about public safety. Is that if I'm walking outside of my home and having an episode, I don't want the police to come and shoot me 14 times. I want a mental therapist to come visit me. I want to be able to provide resources to get my life back on track. I would even like to have food in my stomach, because there are 30 million people who are unemployed and in poverty because of this COVID-19 pandemic that the country has failed to respond to. And so when we talk about these issues, that we want to stop the issue of needing to even call police. What is it that we will allow to reimagine our society where you actually have clean water in your homes and you don't have to be frustrated or fighting with your partner about trying to figure out how you're going to be able to make ends meet because everyone has a guaranteed annual income, where we have reimagined our health care system in this country and realize that everyone has access to a quality of life. And that's, I think, at the core of the problem. It was Mother Teresa that said, I will never go to another anti-war rally. I will only go to a pro-peace rally. And I'm tired of having conversations about how to reform police and change policing. We need to have a pro-peace conversation. What does it look like to create communities that are loving, that are fruitful, that allow us to have a benefit of life that is mutually beneficial to all persons in this country?
100% agree. And I think we fault ourselves when we think that there's one way to do this. I think we have to hit it from multiple angles, from the love angle, from the restructuring, which I don't know. Truthfully, at this point, I kind of think it's broken beyond repair. I think you do have to, and the most hopeful word in this conversation is reimagine. And then if we do take that to task, what does that reimagined vision look like? That is something we have to take a step back and go, what does it look like and how does it serve not just our community equally, but everybody, the way that America promises it treats everybody equally? I want to go to this buzzword, defund the police is so hot and heavy right now. But do you agree with that? Do you agree it should be defund the police or disband the police? Which, by the way, it doesn't matter which word you say, it scares the bejesus out of white America. I'm going to start with you, Congresswoman. Unmute yourself. Thank you so much.
As I said, living in a community now that is mourning the loss of an officer who died in the line of duty, happened to be from the African American community. I can feel the pain in our community. I'm a Black mother, and I understand the mayor's posture, because she too has to lead a community and she has to lead a law enforcement entity. And so I'm a proponent of public safety and the definition of law enforcement from the perspective of guardian. So I want to see guardians in our community. That's reimagining, that's funding that concept. I want to see the vision that we had for the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which is to provide funding to community groups to let them help define how they can be policed. And as I indicated just a few hours ago to some of our law enforcement, that we must deal totally differently with those who suffer from mental illness. Why 14 shots? Why the idea of a gun? Why not a plexiglass shield, to be able to contain the individual. His mother was crying. And so we need to find substitutes for the anguish that we experience. Now, as I said, there's an umbrella of white racism that has to be cured. That's a whole separate line of thinking. But in terms of people recognizing that there must be some form of an entity that deals with those who will do us purposely harm. In our community, again, just a few days ago, unfortunately, 3 rappers were killed by gun violence, young men who need to be alive today. Basically, I want them alive. I want them to be the rappers they wanted to be. Someone has to find out who did that dastardly act. That's a whole issue of violence and the whole issue of dealing with education and opportunities. But someone has to do that. So I believe there's a concept and a place for some form of law enforcement in the context of guarding public safety and community groups working together to define what that is. And I will say to you that if we cross America, there are law enforcement entities that understand that and want to see change. They want to have the intervention. And I'd like to get on the front end because I want to stop the long litany of the Eric Garners, Tamir Rice, Ahmaud Arbery, Mr. Brooks in Atlanta shot before he could go to his daughter's birthday party, Breonna Taylor, Sandra Bland, Pamela Turner, Elijah, and of course, Jacob Blake, and George Floyd. So I want to stop that. There's exhaustion. To do that, you've got to be able to recognize there's something there, and you've got to be able to recognize that you've got to cure the cancer of white racism. I believe we can do it. It's exhausting, but I believe there are people who want to get that done, and we can get that done, I think, with the kind of pressure that we have to engage in and not giving up, not giving up. I can't give up. I can't continue to see people dying in our community.
Thank you. I have to go to you, David, because she believes that curing the cancer of racism and white supremacy is possible. And I think that is very hopeful. And I too keep a little nugget inside of me that it is possible. But I'm wondering from your position, do you think that's worth waiting for? Or do you think we have to reach it from a different angle? Unmute yourself, babe.
I don't think it's possible. Everywhere that an old white man has gone on this planet, they have totally or almost decimated the culture and the bodies of the people that they've lived. Everywhere that they're going, history has told you that. So if we think that we're stronger than history, then I don't know if that's optimism. I would call it something else. What I believe is that if we loved ourselves, it was funny. The pastor was speaking earlier about something that really resonated with me. Marcus Garvey said once, and I'm paraphrasing. Marcus Garvey said he doesn't have a problem with white racism. He said because a lion protects a lion, a tiger protects a tiger. He said the problem isn't white racism; it's the lack of black racism. It's the fact that we don't love each other enough, that we are sitting back waiting on people who historically have never cared about us. They didn't care about us in Tuskegee. They didn't care about us in the 60s. They didn't care about us in the 30s. Anything that white people want to do that affects white children or white bodies, they do it in a day. Mike Vick served more time over a dog than any policeman has over shooting a black body. So to think that these people, the same people that enslaved your ancestors, you think that they're going to wake up one day by the grace of God? It's funny, these white folks always talk about Christianity and Jesus and have never done nothing God-like or Jesus-like on this planet. But let's not even talk about the Africans. Let's talk about the Native American, the indigenous people of this place that we stand on. Where are they? Where are their rights? I'm not even talking about what they do to us. So to me, the day that a person feels like that their children, their livelihood, because white people only respect one of two things or two things. It's the loss of life or the loss of finance. You can talk, you can love, you can hug, until we realize, in my opinion, that our people had two choices. They had Malcolm or Martin. They chose Martin, and look at where we are now. I think we made the wrong choices. So when people feel like that we are willing to give everything, our lives, our finances, the comfort that we have in America, because what we do have to understand, a lot of people who talk about Black power, they financially gain off of the system that we're trying to break down. So a lot of these people are not going to give up their positions, are not going to give up their livelihood for our children. These people are not going to change. We have to change. And as soon as they feel like there's some type of financial or their lives are being threatened by killing our innocent children, because they don't treat their children like that. When the dude, when the bomb exploded in Boston, the guy that ignited the bomb, oh, they hit him in the shoulder. Oh, he was able to make it. The person that went into a church and killed 10, 9, 10, 11 Black folks, he walked out and they took him to Burger King. You think these folks care? They're not going to give justice to their children, their nephews, their mothers, their fathers, their grandma. They're not going to do that unless we are willing to do it. It's not going to change. My opinion.
That's a very powerful perspective and one that makes a lot of sense. As a social justice pastor, Reverend Stephen A. Green, how do you respond to that?
I believe that our righteous indignation at this moment is valid, and it is spiritual for us to be wrestling with these notions of how we move forward and wrestle with this reality. Because if you look back at it, we have a history of discontent, and we're trying to figure out how do we actually make this nation become true to the words she wrote on paper, that she authentically has eliminated us out of the vocabulary of. And I believe that this conversation around defunding and disbanding police, I agree with Brother Banner tonight, is that Black people have always had the short end of the stick, because we have to reframe our ideology to love of self, to help us to be able to honor our own commitments and to uphold our own communities. But it's also this reality that when we talk about defunding and disbanding police, is that the entire system is built on this capitalist exploitative nature that this country has been founded on and been framed upon. And so when we talk about the 13th Amendment and how that slavery is still legal when you have committed a crime, that this goes into the very fabric of the foundational infrastructure of the economy of this country, that the economy of this nation. That's why I believe that reparations and reparative justice is essential to be able to allow Black people to be able to live in communities among themselves. I live in Brooklyn, New York, and with some of the largest Jewish populations in the country, and they are. I am marveled every time I pass through their communities. Not only do they have their own schools, their own neighborhoods, their own school buses. They have their own policing system, their own public safety that is unarmed, that completely protects their community from the NYPD. It would be that's what the Black Panthers were doing. They were protecting our own communities by providing our own articulation of cultural safety. That we can invest resources into community-based partners in New York Life Camp, in Queens, New York, where I pastor. They provide when they have a number. If you are a grandparent and your child is creating some challenges in your home, you don't have to call 911. Call Life Camp, and they'll pull up with their bus that has meditation rooms in it, that allows you to have punching bags in it, that allows you to have therapy centered and deal with some candles and art to be able to process your anger. And we got to recognize that this is cyclical. America has created a culture of violence. This is a violent nation, a violent imperial empire. And because it is such an empire that has provoked violence across the world, it also creates a culture of violence inherently amongst the citizens. So when we talk about nonviolence, we're saying that the only force that is strong enough to conquer hate is love. The only force that is able to stand in front of violence. And I stood in front of rubber bullets and tear gas in Louisville, Kentucky, fighting for Breonna Taylor, is that love and nonviolence affirms our humanity, and it's violent, and it is radical enough, I would say, to be able to affirm our humanity and stand in the tough moments of time. And I believe that's what it's going to take for us to reimagine this new society that we're talking about, to do the work. Because we sometimes stay in these lofty ideals of what this utopian can look like, or this new America that we don't talk about. At the end of the day, what does it look like to take the funds from the $6 million, the $6 billion that funds the police in New York, and reappropriate that money to education, to send those funds over to have more schools, to remodel our parks, to provide a transportation for seniors to go home. And those are adequate ways of being able to shift our budget and change our priorities. Because the Bible says, I guess as a social justice pastor, I got to go here and I'll close, is that where your treasure is where your heart is, right? So where your treasure is, where you allow your resources, reflects your heart. And America's heart has shown that it clearly has a heart condition, because all of our money is sent into war. All of our money is sent into violence and creating and perpetuating this harm to all people in this country.
Uh, right on, like spot on. Thank you for that. I do think that when you talk about violence, we were taught violence in this country by massa. And it seems to be like the ball keeps moving. Like violence is bad, except when it's white people, or violence is bad, except when it's against Black people. And there's where you have the mine F of the century, because they have had, what, 399 years head start. They really know how to play this game well. And whether it's what the Congresswoman was talking about, 3 young rappers were murdered, whether it was Black on Black crime, or whether it's a police killing a Black person, we are being murdered on the streets of America. So I want to talk to you, Mayor Asia Brown, because you are the mayor of Compton, California. It's not the most diverse place. It is predominantly Black. So where do you stand as far as defunding or disbanding the police? Is it more what Reverend Stephen A. Green said, which is having yoga, meditation, intervening with, like, oh, there's a marital spat, let's do some counseling, having something in our community? I grew up mostly around Jewish people, and I have always said they are doing it right. But what they have at their advantage is that they're a culture and they have a language and it's a religion. We are kind of like orphans in this country. Yes, we can adopt their religion, we can adopt their way of doing things, we can adopt their holidays, but ultimately we're still prey to them. So, Mayor Asia, from your perspective, how do you see defunding or disbanding the police? Or do you have another option out there that we haven't thought about?
Well, so much has been said that I wholeheartedly agree with. So much power on this panel. First of all, defund the police is really a rallying cry to realign our values with how we spend our money and how we invest our resources. I also believe that law enforcement is only one aspect of public safety. We have really relied as a nation on law enforcement to address every single societal issue that we face or that we encounter as human beings. And so when I call 911, I shouldn't automatically be dispatched to a law enforcement officer if I have a domestic violence issue, or if there's a mental health issue, or other even domestic violence or other issues. The appropriate resource should be dispatched to that location if we are truly serious about the preservation of life. The second aspect is thinking about how our law enforcement officers train. When law enforcement officers leave their police academy, they're immediately dispatched to the jails, because that's how they're introduced to our community. Historically, African American people are heavily over incarcerated. So that, for many people, is their introduction to interacting with Black men and Black people. And so that has to change. Then they're dispatched out to a community, and then they're incentivized to actually over police and utilize excessive force. I'm a strong believer that until we address the pension system, until law enforcement officers are, number one, financially penalized for their conduct. Currently in the city of Compton, if the officer kills someone and the family, rightfully so, takes legal action and there is a financial damages awarded, the cities that actually contract with the sheriff's department, we pay. The sheriff's department doesn't pay the liability fund. That falls on the back of the taxpayers. And so you tell me what incentive these law enforcement officers have to change their conduct. Until law enforcement officers actually hold their own policies for their own personal conduct, they will not change. That's the bottom line. we already know cash is king. And until people's personal families and their children and their children's children are impacted by their conduct on how they operate on a daily basis, they will not change. And then going on to the fact about we're talking about violence. I live and serve the community of Compton. We're actually now predominantly Latino and still heavily African American, but the source of violence, unfortunately, in my community is not wholly inflicted by law enforcement. We have black on black crime, brown on black crime, black on brown crime, and brown on brown crime. And so until we as black people really get serious about healing from the generations of trauma that we have been inflicted, and that we reassign value to ourselves and our community, and where when we really have black people stop killing black people, then that will signal to everyone else how much we value our own lives. And in turn, I believe they'll in turn treat us differently. We can't continue to try to look for validation in places where, I mean, it just won't be found. I'm hopeful. I'm a person of God. I believe. I have faith. But at the end of the day, until people have their perspectives shifted, then they're going to continue to act in the same manner. And so I can't hold my breath and wait a whole lifetime for people to finally recognize my humanity. What I need to do is in turn look internally, look at my own family, my own community, and assign value there. Because think about if we radically poured out love on each other, and black people actually overcame the things that we were taught to divide each other, the lack of trust, the lack of being communal and working together, and we actually assigned so much value to one another by no longer killing each other and inflicting violence, and then also recognizing that there is a big component that entertainment and media plays into the perpetuation of violence against black people. We can't continue to leave entertainers off the hook as well. We can't allow them to continue to be mouthpieces for perpetuating violence and these cycles of trauma, and then they have no repercussions or no responsibility to the violence that are in turn picked up by these kids in the community that are emulating what they hear and what they see. And so it's a whole continuum of violence. And David talked about this, which I have a lot of respect for Mr. Banner for a very long time, but he talked about the fact that when we think about young people and how they actually look at themselves and how they actually love themselves and value themselves, that is not only an inside job, it's an external job. And so we have to reaffirm our own people and really think about how we recreate our community. There's also comments about the Jewish community in Israel. I had an opportunity to travel to Israel, and it's such a powerful culture that this people was able to continue to manifest and continue to keep thriving in spite of all the external threats. But the common thread with them is that they have a mutual determination that is Israel over whatever their individual objectives are, that they understand that they all must invest into this cycle in order to get reciprocal equity, and that they can all rise and grow together, and that the strength of Israel is really the strength of their individual people and families. And so we have to come together as Black people, reassign value, make sure that we can actually provide some financial penalties to law enforcement officers that continue to violate our rights and extend the loss of life. And then also, again, be able to reinforce what is our mission as Black people, because we can't wait for America to recognize us, and we can't wait for America to provide us what we deserve. They haven't done it yet. And so, I'm hopeful that they will with reparations, but it is something that we have to do ourselves. We have to reinvest ourselves. We have to break the narrative of growing up and getting out the hood and actually move back and reinvest and start these businesses and create jobs and actually transform our communities. But it takes all of us making that commitment.
Woo, there was so much there. And I have to say, some of it caused conflict within me, because we keep hearing that, well, if Black people didn't kill each other, that is not an excuse for police to kill Black people on the streets of America. And then I keep thinking that there was this viral video. It was a white man, and he was talking about what Black people need to do, et cetera. And he said that we have a unique experience that nobody else shares. No, not Jewish people, not Native Americans. We were completely separated from our home. We don't have a language. We don't have religion. They literally stripped us from everything. What the Jewish people had was their religion, their culture. They got to keep it all, right? They didn't have hundreds of years of being bleached, literally, emotionally and spiritually and mentally. So we are coming from a very different place. And what this white man said in this viral video was, when two Black people meet each other on the streets of America, they don't know if their families were from warring tribes or the same tribe. The blood of our ancestors still pump through us. So we come from a very different circumstance that requires a very different solution. So I love where you're coming from, Reverend. We do need to start with love. We need to start with policy. We need to start with rethinking about how to love each other. We need to stop hurting each other. It's like 1,000 things that need to happen all at the same time, which is why we keep having this discussion. Where do we start? Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, take it away.
Thank you so very much. This is a very humbling conversation, but again, it is stark and it is real. I don't think you can find one pathway in the split in the road, because I think we are complex as a people. I'd like to think that we do have an identity. I continue to identify, even if it cannot be particularly pinpointed, with the continent. And I think all of us can, in some way, form or fashion, although it was a extreme break when we came to this place as slaves, we should never deny that just our basic skin color, there is a basic connection to the continent, which, I continue to interact with countries on the continent of Africa, and they have their challenges. We're fighting against police brutality in Nigeria and standing with the Nigerians who are now starting their own Black Lives Matter movement in Nigeria. So it may be that we are facing challenges on this planet that require a multitude of approaches. And I think this issue of love and expansion and looking at the kinds of persons that will come into your community, I won't call them law enforcement, but who comes into the community in time of need? How do we redefine that? But as a legislator, I have to say that there is a place for, in the present time of this day, and maybe in the weeks and months to come, to have people advocate for passing the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. Because everything that the mayor has said in terms of infrastructure is in that bill, and that is the focusing on cost somewhat comes from modifying qualified immunity. She's added another piece to it, which is the individual burden or responsibility that a law enforcement officer would have outside of the tax structure of the local community. And that is something that I'm listening to. So she's speaking to a legislator on that question. She has legislators in her own community. But this bill goes after chokeholds. It goes after no-knock drug invasion, if you will. It goes after separate investigations. It goes after racial profiling and policing that still teaches people excessive force, lack of de-escalation, and the duty to intervene. That's one piece. And then there is an opportunity for the community outside of this bill, even though we specifically put money in for communities to be heard, for them to speak up, for Mr. Brenner to be engaged in things that he may be wanting people to know. But I also believe, as a mother, that there is something to saying that the 3 rappers that I lost in my community, I would prefer for them to be alive. And there has to be some question of how we as mothers deal with that. 3 mothers have lost 3 sons. And I imagine that is happening across America. I don't play the blame game, but what I do say is, yes, we do need to step in on that. And then there's a whole corporate multi-billion, trillion-dollar entity that, out of the output of George Floyd's tragic and heinous death, and his family is here in my community, and they have every day continued to press the point of love, but fighting for their brother, justice, and eliminating this lack of understanding of Black Lives Matter. So how do you match all of that? And I frankly believe that you got to let all of that move forward. HR 40, the idea of reparations is long overdue, and it speaks to restoration and repair, but it is also the large umbrella that can address what happens to ourselves, what happens to inner cities, what happens to the whole mantra of policing in America. And I think it clearly highlights and puts a spotlight on what we talk about, whether we can get rid of it or not, which is institutional racism and white racism. And the only thing I would say in this is that while you live, you got to keep working. And my answer may be different from some of those who individuals, fine panelists that they are, may be different. But if we're each working in our corridors, we're going to make some change. And there may be a point where it'll be so seismic that we'll look back and say, what was it 100 years ago or 50 years ago? I don't remember that, because we've made the seismic change that America needs to have. But we must get people continuing in their frustration to keep the pressure on, to keep the struggle going, to keep engaging in what we have right now. And this is, I think, with George Floyd, with reparations concept, and with understanding how we have to deal with police, is what we have to continue to press forward on.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And I respect both of you so much, Mayor Asia Brown and Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. It is a very powerful way. And what some people would say, it's a very powerful way to fight the system. But what some people would say is you're still playing their game that was meant to keep us out. So I want to go to you, Mr. David Banner. What is this? We're just going to be our final statements here. What is your response? Yes, we want to take it to the politics, because I firmly believe Black women lead. We needed more Black women in politics, more Black men in politics to keep pushing the envelope. But from the outside, Mr. David Banner, what are your thoughts? Final thoughts, actually. Can you unmute yourself?
What I'll say is the key to everything is for us to support our own communities. It says a lot when you look next door and see who you stay next to. It says a lot the schools that you send your kids to. We are one of the few communities on this planet that put our children in school so they can go work for the same people that oppress them. I always ask this question all the time. I always ask, would Jewish people send their children to go to school with Nazis, or to be educated by Nazis, or to work for Nazis? We all know that they wouldn't. So do you believe that they are better than you because we do it all the time? The way to solve every problem is self. You know, and Pastor, one of the things that I'll say too, I think one of the reasons why we never fight back is because in a lot of cases, our people still have that picture of Jesus in their head. If God doesn't look like you, then we're always forgiving that picture that we see in our head. When I first became conscious, and I knew for a fact, there's no way they're gonna hide Jesus amongst a whole bunch of Africans that were darker than Akon, and he be white. Even the description that they have in the Bible is not of that. So psychologically, I'll say this in closing. One of the reasons why I believe a lot of Black people are afraid of true freedom, and that's loving self, living amongst each other. Stop looking for somebody else to do something for you. Stop looking for a Jesus in the sky. I believe the story of Jesus was not that he was supposed to bear your cross, but he was going to show you how to bear your cross while he was on earth. But people don't want to fast for 40 days and 40 nights so they can walk on water. Our community is our cross to bear. Them folks ain't never cared about us. I don't care if it's the left wing or right wing. We talk about Trump all the time, but Joe Biden has been a part of every major crime bill that has affected our community since the latter part of the 70s up to the the bill that Clinton passed in 94. He has physically helped put 600,000 Black males in jail. I got a problem with him too. So the thing is if we are truly going to engage in any of these processes, it has to be for self. That's one of the things that I salute the mayor for. Until we put people that have a vested interest in our community, it'll never change. Until we are willing to heal our people, educate our people. We talk about politicians and rappers, but we got Black teachers in Black public schools, or schools that are predominantly Black, that still teaching our people that Christopher Columbus discovered America. I think that's just as bad. So The truth is, nobody is coming to save you. A white man ain't coming out of the sky with blue eyes to save every problem that you have. Until you're willing to live and die for your children, your community, it will stay the same. Thank you.
Well, obviously, we are not going to come to any succinct conclusion today, nor should we. It is a problem that has been festering for a very long time. We're going to go back to Carl Davis, who we missed in the beginning. Carl, if you can unmute yourself, I want you to let the people know about your organization. Take it away. Nice to have you here.
Thank you so much, Tanika. First, I want to thank the Aspire TV channel. I want to thank the Aspire TV channel, Melissa and her entire team, and the Revolt Team TV on the partnership with the Future of Black America and 88 Chump to bring the future of Black America to their TV audience. The Future of Black America tonight has provided a platform for African American leaders to engage, strengthen, and educate Americans on issues pertinent to the vitality of Black communities. This year's theme, the New Covenant, offers thought leaders, as you heard tonight, panelists, viewers, and all of America, an opportunity to engage in an honest dialogue on the lived experience of Black America and offer solutions to community concerns. The Future of Black America has featured African Americans who lead constructive dialogue to the economic, education, faith, and social justice issues that impact the daily lived experience of Blacks in America. Tonight, we had the opportunity as we gather to discuss pertinent issues relevant to the vitality of our Black community. Our theme, the New Covenant, the George Floyd Social Justice Project, has motivated and influenced us to be proactive going forward. George Floyd's murder electrified the nation and finally shifted America's focus to the unfair police practices that target us. We talked about eliminating chokeholds and no-knock policies. We've gotten radical and talked about defunding and disbanding police. But what should the future of policing in America look like? What's next for police reform? How do we get politicians and police leadership on board? And finally, does America exist where we don't fear for our safety when we encounter cops or when we take on the criminal justice system? Wise principles of government and good laws can do and have done much for the benefit of the Black community, but nothing is more fatal than the overestimate their power. To do so tends to breed in mankind the most deadly of all diseases, which has afflicted society, the infection of racism, the corruption and epidemic of the killing of Black men and women, the layers of self-dependence, and the weak impulse to find help from government entities that should grant all men life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness at every step upon the road of life. We came tonight to realize that our programs, our progress together is neither instinctive, routine, spontaneous, nor inevitable, but every step we take must engage strength and educate America.
Thank you, Carl.
And more importantly, Black America. Every step toward the goal of justice, fairness, integrity, and lawfulness requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle, the tireless exertion and passionate concerns of dedicated individuals. Let us accept the benefits gained by those who have paved the way for us, but let us continue to look forward to the future improvements. But those improvements must be attained as the improvements of the past have been obtained. Only through hard work, dialogue, education, social reform, dedication, and commitment generated by and through Black leadership and the Black community. Our demanding spirit compels us to be self-controlled, competent, and willing to govern our impulses by the rule of declaring principle. And more than that, we must have a love for liberty, not only for ourselves, but the liberty for others, our brothers and our sisters. All of us have felt a knee on our neck and have felt the blood rush to our heads. We have felt our heart beats much faster, but we felt disgusted and hated, yet we still have the spirit of love. That spirit excludes hatred of others, no matter their race or ethnicity. That spirit excludes a desire to abuse, to vilify, or destroy. So let us work together, stay together, pray together, and overcome together in making this old world a new and better world. That's, my friend, is the reason I welcome you all here tonight, and the reason I have the honor, great honor, of introducing Mr. Herbert Mouton, one of the founders of 88 Trump, an organization established in honor of their childhood friend and Jack Lake Yates football team member, Mr. George Floyd. Herbert Mouton.
Thank you, Carl, for that magnificent introduction and welcoming to the program. I'd like to thank Spot TV for allowing us to share this platform with them. Just a little bit about the friendship with George Floyd that I had. Friendships determines alliances. Alliances which results from friendship developed and maintained may bring disagreements and perils, but never hate, distrust, and dishonor. Friends may not always see eye to eye, but camaraderie, bonding, and unions will always be sure, honorable, and upright. And that is how George and I will throughout our lives. We are told that greater love has no one than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. I am here today because George Floyd's life was laid down, not because it was just, not because it was fair, but because of bigotry, hatred, and disparities and inequalities. In reality, of all us are children of God and are born free and equal. But how many truly find meaning within those words? When one is judged by the color of his skin and the other is presumed not guilty based on the color of his skin tone, it is difficult securing many of life's basic prerequisites that are granted by the Constitution and God Almighty. I know today that George Floyd and my friendship with him was rock solid. Not only were we teammates, but we huddled together on and off the field. We called plays in life of what we wanted to do, what we wanted to accomplish, and how we would go about fulfilling our dreams. We watched the clock because time was winding down as we grew older, and we both made sure that life would not catch us off sides. Because being of running with the wrong crowd, we took our positions as friends, as competitors, and as brothers. We fought not only in the trenches of life against the powers that were destined to hold us back, but against the people who enforced those unjust powers. With all of my soul, I believe in the powers of light against the powers of darkness. Sometimes these powers are arrayed in the contest, a game as broad as a football field. Sometimes they may arrayed in a conflict on a street corner that embraces the whole nation. But in the end, they include all nations and all humanity. Always in one form or another, justice always prevails, and the people advance upon the foundations of hope. And in the end, the people of goodwill always triumph.
Thank you. We're going to close out. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, you have the last word. Please unmute.
Tanika, I think this was a very powerful moment, and I feel your sincerity in which way should we be going. And I hope as those who have had this opportunity to hear this vigorous discussion from passionate, not only spokespersons, but persons who are deeply embedded in our community, will take away several things. One, as a people, we are multidimensional with a common heritage triggered from our respective heritage. But we must find love, we must find our anguish and find action. And yes, we must find a way to deal with this in the current structure of laws and the current structure of change. I'd like to be a change agent, and I hope from all of this comes the pathway for being a change agent. And I do know that since it was mentioned about the presidential candidates, I would hope that everyone who has the power within themselves to love themselves will get out and vote in this upcoming election. And I do hope they ask the hard questions. Some of our candidates indicated that some of the things they were involved in were mistakes. But I can truly say that knowing personally Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, that their mind and their hearts are intertwined with change. And I hope people will look and understand. But as they make their own decisions, I hope they will also love themselves and fight for their people and fight for their children and fight that we make a difference. I'm going to be fighting with them for a powerful and seismic change.
Thank you. And I do respect everybody's opinion here. David Banner was talking about how Joe Biden was guilty as well. And I think what we have to understand is that we're all being conditioned. We're all being conditioned from news that we're scary, they're innocent. And I can't fault, well, I can fault him for what he did in the past, but he also had 8 years under the tutelage, I like to call it, of Barack Obama. And I can only hope that he is a changed, shifted, evolved man. Am I voting for him because I'm passionate? No, but I'm voting against the man that is in the White House. And I think a lot of people feel that way. Thank you guys so much for being here. We have lost Mayor Asia Brown because we are over time. We have lost Mr. David Banner, but they were both incredible. Thank you, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee and Reverend Stephen A. Green. I'm honored. Thank you, Carl Davis. This was an incredible conversation that obviously we haven't even scratched the surface. It must continue until we can really fortify our angles and start loving ourselves, start voting like our lives depended on it, because it does. Stop demonizing being responsible for our own community. We have a lot of things we need to shift, but if any time is the right time to shift, a pandemic is. So thank you very much. Thank you for you guys who are tuning in, and the fight goes on. George Floyd! 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 He was born in North Carolina. He was heaven sent. Whoa. Grew up in Houston. He's been busy ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know change is gonna come. Yes, it will. Oh, it's been too hard living, but he didn't have to die. George Floyd didn't hurt nobody. He was trying to comply. It's been a long time coming, but I know change is gonna come. Yes, it will. He didn't want no trouble. They had him down on the ground. It was all over $20. Why did the laws even have to come around? It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come. Yes, it will. Listen, I can hear him call his mother, saying, "Mother, help me please," 'cause he knew every time that he called his mother would immediately get down on her knees. Oh, he said, "I can't breathe, I can't last for long." Now he's resting in peace. Somehow we gotta carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. I said a change gonna come.
He did what?
Daddy changed the world.
Daddy changed the world.